Kia ora whānau, nau mai, hara mai, and welcome to tonight's Centre for Health Hawara Kōrero. Ko Natalie Hilterman toku ingoa, and I'm privileged to be able to host tonight's kōrero all about women's health. When we think about women's health, we automatically think about it from a biological point of view, but we also think that as wahine, we're pretty good at looking after ourselves, more so when we compare ourselves to our male counterparts. But through research for the Hawara Kōrero and talking to a few wahine, there were a lot of things that as women, we didn't talk about, or we just didn't know that were happening to us and our bodies. So I'm really excited to talk about tonight's topic in terms of women's health, and hopefully we can unpack some of those themes for our viewers tonight. So welcome to our whānau watching at home. I'll pass the raka over to Hannah, who will open with the whakatauki. Kia ora, Hannah.
Kia ora, Nat. Kia ora whānau. Yeah, really stoked to actually be talking with these amazing ladies tonight. I've known some of them forever, some of them are new friends, and the hilarity and the knowledge that we share during our chats and catch-ups has been amazing, much of which won't be shared tonight. So I trying to find a whakatauki for tonight. It was actually quite hard to find one that actually kind of encompassed what we were going to talk about, and trying to encompass everything that we were going to talk about, because actually this topic is so broad, and as we've discovered, we could literally talk for days on it. What I have been doing, I've been reading this really beautiful book by Ngāhuia Murphy. It's actually her master's thesis called Te Awa Atua. This is it here. Oh, sorry, I've blurred screen. Anyway, we'll put the link to it in the comments. But it's essentially about teaching us about the historical views on women, on menstruation, and the way that that was perceived through different lenses over the course of time. So I'm literally starting with the first sentence in her book, which is a saying from Tangaroa in 2007. There is a sequence to transformation, and it begins with interpretation. And essentially, to summarize that, the way that we look at health, the way that we look at things that we possibly don't openly discuss, or the way that we perceive certain things, is facilitated by our environment. It's facilitated by the people that we spend most time with. It's from our own experiences, and it's from our own understanding and awareness of those things as well. And so trying to encourage open conversations around a lot of things which for whatever reasons we've often thought are not necessarily needed to be discussed openly, or shouldn't be discussed openly with other people. Yeah, it's time to change that. So that's hopefully what we'll discuss a little bit of tonight, and that'll feed into more conversations later on. Yeah.
Amazing, Hannah. Thank you so much for that beautiful opening. And absolutely, everyone at home, what was the name of our puka puka tonight, Hannah? What was that again?
Te Awa Atua, menstruation in the pre-colonial Māori world. Regardless of who you are, it'll open your eyes to a whole lot of stuff, even if you think you knew everything already.
Aye. Right. Awesome, thanks, Hannah. Now what we're going to do now, whānau, is we're just going to introduce everyone who's on our panel tonight. I'm actually going to start with Vanessa. Kia ora, Vanessa. Did you want to just tell our whānau watching at home who you are and your area of expertise?
Yeah, hi, I'm Vanessa Davies. So I'm originally from the UK, lived in Wales, and I only moved over to New Zealand recently. So last year, moved over with my family. And my background is actually in elite sport. So I worked in elite sport in Wales for the last 18 years. A lot of my work in that area was around female athletes and also recovery. And that I got my interest then within female athlete, led on to kind of more female health-based work. And I've kind of trained up now in the third age woman, which is perimenopause and menopause, which we'll talk a bit more about during this. And yeah, that's kind of led me to the Centre for Health and helping them to kind of support the women in New Zealand going through the menopause transition.
Awesome. Kia ora, Vanessa. And anyone watching at home, Vanessa does an amazing, jump onto our website later because Vanessa does an amazing menopause and perimenopause training facility. Now I'm going to introduce Cherie. Kia ora, Cherie.
Kia ora. Ko Kotirana me Ingarani, ngā iwi, ko Trotarawa, ko Tidmarsh, ngā hapu, no Tūranga Nui a Kiwa aho, no Orapia nei, ko Gavin, taku tāne, ko Reef, Rato, ko Jala, ko Ryan, ko Jay, aku tamariki, ko Cherie Cooper aho. My expertise is I've been a woman now for 49 3/4 years. And I'm going to bring it tonight to really celebrate that expertise. So yeah, let's get on this roller coaster ride together. Really excited to be amongst this panel of actual experts and to celebrate all things wahine.
Oh, you're amazing, Cherie. I love you. Matilda, please introduce yourself, please, sweetheart.
Kia ora, I'm Matilda Lawrence. I'm a GP here in Mount Maunganui. Had 10 years now of being a GP or doctor in New Zealand, but I was trained in the UK, born in Canterbury, UK, but grew up in Wales too, and also female. And I feel like I'm very lucky because I love being a GP, and I know that GPs are under a lot of stress at the moment, and actually there's a lot of people that are upset in their profession, and also I think there's a lot of people out there that are actually struggling to navigate working with their GP as well. So I'm hopefully here tonight as a GP, and so we aren't experts in anything, we're generalists, and to be a good generalist is really bloody hard, and to be a woman's really hard. And what I really love to bring to my consults is navigating health, who you are, and kind of where you're going. And I do think for women that's like super challenging, and I just love keeping on trying and keeping on having really cool conversations, and I don't really hold back, and what you see is what you get. And yeah, that's kind of me. I know Hannah through sport, so since being in New Zealand I've been really active, and I've definitely pushed myself and my body to incredible extremes which I didn't think was humanly possible, and all part of that is about understanding how best to work with yourself whilst doing a really challenging job. So yeah, I don't know, I could talk about me, but it's not about me. So is there anything else you want to know?
It's awesome, Matilda. And Hannah, did you want to introduce yourself, please, sweetheart?
Sure. Kia ora, ko Hannah taku ingoa. From here in Tauranga, been fortunate for this to be my home forever for my 32 years of being a woman or female. I'm a clinical exercise physiologist. So rather than medication, I prescribe exercise and lifestyle measures to help people through all sorts of different phases of life, and coping with all sorts of different aspects of life as well. I guess I'm stoked to actually have this conversation as well, because it's similar with Tilly. I've put my body through a lot of stuff. It's not very happy with me a lot of the time, and I've been through the help of some other incredible women have actually helped figure out things that I've needed to do to change in my life, to look after myself better, from mental health to bone health to everything in between. Just stoked to be here tonight with all of you guys.
Beautiful. And I think we're going to unpack quite a few of those themes tonight, Hannah. So let's start broad, because I know we're going to zero in on a few topics tonight, but our first topic is really about societal views. So how does society impact our self-perception as wahine? Hannah, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, well, purely from coming more from, I guess, the research aspect and what I've been reading, women are perceived to be the carers, the nurturers, the look after everybody else is. They're the ones who everybody goes to for help. They're the ones who can solve anything. They're the ones who support the family, look after the family, and do everything for everybody else. And I think that's certainly a lot of the women that I've been working with lately, that's bloody tiring, and it's resulting in a lot of issues. So that's the way that, more from the, I guess, a perception of women from a community lens is the way that I've noticed. Anyone else?
Yeah, Vanessa, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree, and particularly, obviously, a lot of my work at the moment is in the area of perimenopause and menopause, and there's research out there as well that suggests that the perception of society on women, on menopause, actually can have either a negative or a positive impact on a woman and her experience, particularly going through the menopause transition. In the Western kind of world, the society, it's kind of, menopause is quite negative. A lot of the language used around it is sort of quite negative, and it's not seen as sort of this kind of positive experience. Whereas in other cultures, actually, it's celebrated, and women do report then having, they don't have those struggles going through that menopause transition. They don't kind of experience sort of such severe symptoms. And it's actually kind of celebrated. So yeah, I think that, society's perception is, does have a big impact on women and how they manage and cope with things.
I love that, Vanessa. Tilly, have you got any other whakaaro?
Certainly a very broad thing, isn't it? I think that probably one of the typical societal things is about women and their appearance, and that is everything from their body shape to their eyebrow shape to how they speak, how they move, and I think women can spend a lot of time thinking about how they are on the outside and not actually how they are on the inside. So I think a lot of what we want to talk about is how they are physiologically, so how their hormones are, like how they are emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and all of that is so much more important and comes out in how people are and actually how they end up looking and being perceived, and people being happy, content, and understanding their body and their minds, and especially for women, I just think that that's like a huge goal, because I feel like it comes last, whether we're young and trying to be a certain way, or we're older and we're managing children, a job, husbands, partners, and elderly parents potentially, and then ultimately incredible survivors. And yeah, I just think that women are so strong and they put up with so much, and quite often they don't really know who they are because they're just going through the stage after stage after stage of change, adapt, cope. And yeah, I think that helping people to understand who they are, what their purpose is, and then working within that is just so important.
Totally agree. Cherie?
I think backing up what Tilly was saying about, the appearance and aesthetics, the social media, movies, it's kind of like there's a certain finite age, and I'm not sure exactly what that crossover is, but you're kind of on the heap after that. It's kind of like, yeah, you're done. Your prime's over. You're not aesthetically pleasing. Just get on with your own little lives and stay quiet. It's just kind of and perhaps that's the exception, not the rule, but there is this sort of societal view of a woman's worth through the ages, and how productive or how connected she's going to be throughout those years as a valid member of society. And something I think that's really encouraging now is this body positive imaging, women growing their greys out and really embracing that, and not rushing off to colour it in kind of thing, and that aging is this beautiful natural occurrence that, you know, we could all straighten each other's crowns with.
100% agree. Holding each other up. I love that. Hey, we've just had a partai from our Facebook whānau. And Vanessa, it pertains to how we were talking about how there's quite a negative perception around your period and around menopause. And Serena's just asked which cultures view things like that, view perimenopause and menopause kind of negatively. I guess reading Ahuia stuff, I mean, if we go back in the day, Māori had a very positive kind of approach to menstruation and menopause, and it was a celebrated topic. It was your becoming of your womanhood. The men kind of picked up the load of chores, while the wahine kind of took it easy. Ness, from a menopausal kind of point of view, what's your whakaaro on that? Have you done any research in terms of more into that?
Only touched on it a little bit through the kind of the training that I've done, but I think a lot of it is kind of around the language that's used. So when they talk around symptoms, it's kind of like, you know, what are you suffering from? Are you suffering from, you know? So it puts that negative sort of spin on it. So yeah, so from that sort of point of view, but there was some research, I actually wrote it down so I made sure I said the right thing, so Japanese women actually are the healthiest women in the world, so they have lower incidences of osteoporosis, breast cancer, heart disease and reproductive cancers. But actually when Japanese women actually moved to the US, they actually ended up with these disorders ended up with a similar rate of Caucasian American women. So it was very much about that culture and the environment where you're living.
So environmental factors in terms of what they were eating and stuff. And so we're talking about the Western kind of diets, societal norms, working 5 million hours a week, there's not that same, I don't know. So as soon as they've moved into a different culture, i.e. American culture, all of those.
Yeah, the health. We're all the same from it was for Caucasian American women that they looked at it with. So yeah, so it just kind of shows, I mean, that's only one piece of research. There's a lot more out there that I'd need to kind of go into, but that really interested me, that moving from a certain environment and one culture into another one can actually have such a negative impact on your
health
and your overall health and well-being.
Does anyone else have any whakaaro on that?
Yeah. Oh, you go,
Tilly. You go, Hannah.
Oh, it is. I think, and this is purely just from some light readings, and I haven't delved too much deeper into it, so my understanding is only a little bit brief, but certainly, like, when women are menstruating, they are celebrated because they have the potential to be a life. However, once they move through menopause and then post-menopause, they're celebrated because they're now considered more of an elder or a kuia within whānau. They're a wealth of knowledge, and they're celebrated in that context instead. And so I think the different phases of life, we have different, I don't like using the word purposes, because our purpose on life isn't to breed, but you have a different role in life, and that does change as we go through these different phases, and so we can then celebrate different aspects. So once you're through menopause, you still have all of this knowledge that you can then share with younger generations and with other people, and that's something that should be celebrated and looked on in a really positive light. Yeah. Sorry.
I love that. Tilly?
Was the question just in and around what cultures have a negative take on menopause.
It just says which cultures. with
Yeah,
regard
so
to
I mean,
Vanessa's
I
statement.
think kind of Western white people, and you know, I'm just talking really just from my own experience, you know, even just people saying, oh, you're on your period, or, you know, oh, she's probably on the rag, or and then all this kind of like subtle stuff where you keep your stuff hidden, and it's like devastating if a tampon falls out your trousers, you know, like all this stuff where it's actually supposed to be kind of quiet, and we did a lot to kind of hide it. And then just in terms of the conversations and how we're treating people, you know, you might see one of your colleagues clearly having terrible hot flushes, been off sick with migraine. No one asks them, you know, have you had some help with your clearly very menopausal symptoms, or even completely a change in character, change in their body shape, and like putting on weight. You know, it's all just become very awkward conversations. Whereas, you know, if a guy comes in because he's been in the gym for 4 weeks, it'd be like, oh, clearly you've been working out. It's not, oh, clearly you're menopausal. So I don't know. I just think that it is through a combination of awkwardness around the conversation, but probably actually, again, just coming back to that education, and actually I think women personally not really understanding what the hell's going on with them. I mean, how many women do you know that are so relieved when they get their period because they felt that they were losing their mind, and actually they've had this like crazily chemically different body for like 3-4 days, super unfamiliar, not slept, etc. And why is that still such a surprise? Why are we all still learning about that? Why is a GP 10 years into being a GP and 30, how many, 7, 8 years into being a woman, am I still learning all this amazing information about what our bodies are doing? And that's because we don't talk about it much. I think we do now, but like we didn't before. So yeah, I think that we're probably super guilty as educated white people.
And now we're doing it tonight, which I love. Sheree, do you have any whakaaro just in terms of maybe from a mama perspective too, you know, like is that not the culture thing, but kind of jumping on Tilly's? How do you talk about it with, you've got
3 girls.
3 girls, that's right, yeah.
3 girls, yeah, one son, yeah.
So how does all of those korero go?
It's pretty open in our house. It's pretty matter of fact with a sprinkling of humour, but it's talked about. You know, it's not, we're not ashamed about it. It explains, you know, the run up and how the body's going through stuff, and maybe how you're feeling about yourself. It's the inconvenience when sport's connected. So like if my girls are going away for a big sporting event and they know they're going to get their period, it's like, oh no, when's it going to be here? Like it's an angst. So it sort of can get in the way of focus on performance. So, you know, that's when you're looking at alternatives of, you know, contraceptive pills or things like that, not necessarily for that reason, but 2 of my girls had just the most terrible, debilitating cramps where for a week they were just shadows of themselves, and it was pretty intense. And it was something I didn't understand because I was a 3-day, here it is, there it was, oh, it's gone. So I didn't get cramps. I didn't understand any of that. So learning through my girls' experience, just to acknowledge that everyone's different, every woman's different, and to ride the wave with it, and to not excuse it, because it's just a natural part of who we are and who we're born to be.
You are doing amazing to have 3 wahine toa, that you are growing and still laughing at every turn.
Oh, you got it.
Yeah, I hear. Okay, so we've kind of gone an awesome opening in terms of societal and even how different cultures kind of approach you know, your period and menopause and stuff. But let's kind of talk about this menopause thing. I only learnt maybe, and I'm 42, a couple of years ago that there was this thing called perimenopause. And when I was doing research for this tonight's kōrero, a lot of my friends didn't know that there was this thing called perimenopause. And it was over a drink that, I was like, what are you talking about? We're getting menopause. Is that not enough? Why do we have to have premenopause, perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause? Why do we have to get all the pauses? So let's have a little bit of a kōrero around what is perimenopause, what is menopause, what are the different stages? Ness, do you want to have a bit of a kōrero about that kōrero? Because I think there'd be a lot of whānau at home wanting to understand, how we change, what's happening, that it's happening.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think something that I find a lot of women, surprises a lot of women, is menopause is actually just one day. So that is the day that's 12 months after you had your last period. So you just have one day of menopause. The time beforehand, where you could be experiencing certain symptoms and changes, that is classed as perimenopause, and that can last for up to 10 years before you go through the menopause. And then once you hit your day, hit the menopause, then that is post-menopause. So they're kind of like those sort of three stages. Obviously, before perimenopause, you've got kind of like the reproductive years, and then puberty before that.
So let's have a kōrero about why, like, we all hear about menopause and all the negative stuff about that, but let's have a kōrero about what perimenopause is, some symptoms, like what are some examples around what's happening to our bodies physiologically, and maybe some signs that our whānau at home can go, actually, that's me, that's happening to me, and I didn't know why I was going crazy, why I was acting like this, why I have to run away from my husband in the other direction when he looks at me, whatever, what is going on mentally, physically, because I was the same, like, menopause one day, what? And then we don't talk about the other however many years of stuff going on.
Yeah, do you want me to take this one, Tilly, or do you want to have a
do you want a break? I can do a little bit.
Okay, you can you jump in and then I'll.
Okay, so I'll take it back a little bit. When we're a fetus, we're basically deciding, when we're fertilized by our parents, then we become a fetus, and then we basically get a certain number of eggs as a woman, and that is us then. And then as we go through our early years, everything's kind of quiet, and we hit puberty, which we all seem to know a bit more about. I think that there's probably a lot more to know about puberty, but we basically get the gist of puberty. This going up, hormones going up, and that's as a woman starts to cycle, so release an egg, build up a lining of their uterus, hopefully don't get pregnant at this stage, and then the uterus lining falls away, and that's the period, right? So that's happening for most women on a kind of monthly basis. And so we've got puberty, this kind of time where we're like a bit hesitant with the puberty, well, not anyway, pubertal people. And then everything levels out for the majority, not all females. And then we have the inverse, which is perimenopause. So hectic. And then we have menopause, and then hopefully again everything kind of flatlines. And so perimenopause is actually the ovaries getting a little bit tired, not easily releasing an egg, the brain's telling them to work. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, so you get these hectic hormonal fluctuations, and that is what accounts for a lot of familiar symptoms for women. So they're sort of trying to make head or tail of it, get it 1 month, maybe not the next, etc. And we can go into all of those symptoms as we continue to talk, but I quite like the kind of inverse puberty thing. And then menopause day, 1 day, and then kind of what your deal is after that. So again, we're all so individual, and what I think is amazing about us, but and challenging as a GP, is that we're all so different, and we all respond really differently to different hormones at different levels. So we've all got these different symptoms, and there's like 40 plus symptoms of menopause, and then they're all completely individual. So where do you want to start?
Oh my goodness. Yes. I got nothing.
Maybe one in terms of you were saying about how do you know if you're sort of in perimenopause, it might be one of the first things that women might notice is changes in their menstrual cycle. So to start with, you kind of get 2 stages to the perimenopause. So to start with, they might actually start having kind of much heavier periods and like flooding. So that, you know, due to the drop off initially in the progesterone levels, and then as it kind of progresses into the second stage of perimenopause, they might start to see what they might expect in terms of coming up to menopause is sort of lighter periods and a bit more irregular, and those sorts of things. So that might be kind of the stuff that they might notice first, as well as some of the symptoms.
Interestingly, this hot flush thing that is probably the typical hot flush thing is actually only 20% of women. So only 20% of women actually get the typical hot flush.
So
and actually this, I'm just going to say 40 because it's more than 30, and I think it's more than 35, but that kind of number of symptoms is much more the issue that I think that we're dealing with. And that's because we've got estrogen receptors over our whole body, brain, skin, hair, nails, ovaries, breasts, muscles, bones, joints. And so everything is affected, and yeah. And so period changing and hot flashes is like what we kind of know about on the surface, and what I think we've normalized as menopause. But actually, I think there's a whole big conversation around all the other stuff that's vital to women wellness.
Kia ora, Tracy. Just wanted to acknowledge Tracy. Thank you, sweetheart.
Kia ora, Nat. Apologies, just nutty internet stuff. I've had a mission of a time, but I'm very happy to be here with this amazing group of women. So, yeah, kia ora.
Welcome, Tracy. We've just had a question online. There's a lot of conflicting information about how to manage peri and menopause. What advice do you have for women transitioning into these phases? Now, I know that we're going to be popping some information into the feed of this live feed for later, that Nessa's going to pop some things in there, because I think that particular question has come up in our kōrero. There's so much information out there, but where do you get the right information? So between all of us, we'll be popping some information into the feed about where you can get some really great advice for that. So thank you for your partai, Joy. Oh, that's something else that's just come through. In particular, diet, exercise, stress reduction, etc. Yeah, we're going to talk about stress. Don't worry about that. Let's talk about confidence, though, because we actually haven't touched on that, and how a woman's confidence is compromised, is impacted during this perimenopause time. We had a kōrero earlier about this. Does anybody want to pick that thread up? Sure.
Yeah, happy to. Where does one begin?
The beginning.
I'm not sure if it was the bridge to perimenopausal or not, or if it's just my genetic gifts from my parents. For me, it was things like I really prided myself on having a good memory, and I'd be in front of students. I work at Toiho Mai, and I'd be in front of students and I couldn't think of a word, like an easy word like assessment. So I'd smoke and mirrors and jazz hands my way through it to pretend that I didn't know and they didn't need to know. But just the other day, I'm talking with my friends, and instead of saying accommodation, I say avocado. Now that's not even a safe word. So I don't even know where avocado came from. I know it's a superfood, but like, what the heck? Why am I, I'm saying these sort of random things that make no sense, and I can hear myself saying it. So I'm processing it going,
Oh no, come back, Sheree.
We're having issues with
A really
Mira.
good pause.
Oh
Oh no. She'll
I
be
actually have 40-year-old women coming and asking me for
that was
dementia
affected. I
assessments.
started getting headaches, and the headaches I was so worried about, I went to the GP and I got a CT scan and an MRI because I was so worried about what was going on in my head. That and the period cycles where, I was happy with the 3-day weekend. I was like, yeah, here it is, but then all of a sudden I've got these 7-day benders of a period, and I'm like, what the Friday? Like, it was just like, it was my whole, what I knew was me was changing, and I felt out of control of it. And so doing the course with Ness and having amazing colleagues and friends like Tracy certainly gives a good understanding of what it is versus what it isn't, because you can go down the scroll hole of Google and put all your symptoms in, and she's not a pretty picture. So it's just how that rocks your confidence in who you are. And when you're in those frontline roles like teaching, the weariness that you go in with, the anxiety, and that's sort of something that's new to me now, as I get this sort of anxious state. And I'm just blaming everything on perimenopause. Surely. Diagnose that.
Tilly, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's not uncommon for women to come in and ask for a dementia test because they've just like lost their memory. And I think, like, even a year ago, I wouldn't have been thinking perimenopause. I feel like it's really the last 6 months or so where I've just taken a real, like, passionate, I just wanted to do something that wasn't COVID and just learn about something exciting and just do better for women with really complicated symptoms who were, so many people, I think confidence is a great word, just lost who they are, and they're, as you say, Sheree, they're frightened by everything. And I have a pretty well population, and over at the mountain, they take good care of themselves, those women. Beautiful. And yeah, for them to feel out of control and not functioning on all cylinders is really frightening, and can definitely lead to some rabbit hole stuff. And we need to help people to be well and to embrace those changes.
And so, okay, so in terms of that, because one of the partai that's come up is changes to your sex life. And do you get a lot of those questions, Tilly?
No, but I ask them.
Yeah. Because that was one of the things that kept coming up that my girlfriends didn't want to talk about. But then when we spoke about it, there was a real change in their sex life, and we all quite close, but nobody really wanted to talk about it until I made them. So let's have a corridor about that.
I think a big challenge is that women are going into perimenopause usually from postnatal. And I don't know how long we class postnatal, to 18 or beyond. I don't know. But sex life is challenged by many things. And on that note, like, I always we think of the guy being brought in by his wife and sitting there. But quite often a woman's been asked to come in by their partner because they're not interested anymore. And, and they say, oh, I've lost my libido. And it hurts, or, you know, those sorts of things. So those questions definitely do come up, but they're not usually the first thing someone will say. It's oh, and by the way, and you're like, oh, that's the best topic we could have a good conversation about. And now we're at the end.
Totally. Let's talk about sex, man. So is it a physiological thing that's going on? What's happening to your body because you've just said it hurts. What's happened? Like what's going on in your body for it to just change?
You want to take this one, Ness, or shall I? So again, I guess coming back to those estrogen receptors and that wonderful hormone called estrogen, and our vagina is, and whole pelvis really, all of us, pituitary, ovaries, vagina, uterus, and those estrogen levels fluctuating and ultimately dropping means that those cells that just loved being flooded with estrogen to keep them kind of plump and moist. We love those words.
Love them words.
And resilient to wee and poo and semen and friction and underwear and, you know, all this stuff. And then they just kind of get a bit dry and fragile. And I often go, imagine turning your cheek inside out and rubbing it and putting stuff on it and, you know, all this stuff, and it just gets sore. And actually there's this other term called atrophy, where actually means like shriveling up, and vaginas do that. Vaginal atrophy, isn't that a lovely term? But yeah, and quite often we don't find out about it till they're forced to come for their smear, and you know, that's a time when we really do have these, well, we should really be having these conversations, you know.
That's a perfect time, because it's about education, right? Like, it's not about trying to shame people. It's just, if you don't know, you don't know. You're not going to ask those questions, like you said, Tilly. Like, it's probably not the first thing that your patients come in to have a korero about, but then, oh, and this is happening. We want this too.
And I think women are so expected to be these sexual beings because of, again, going back to what you said at the beginning, like because of society. And actually most of us aren't really, and we might try, and the women that are kind of lucky really, and you know, there's so many other factors, and then when you're tired and there's all this other stuff, and ultimately I do think a lot of women are kind of putting up with having sex or feeling like they should, and so they're already feeling a lack of confidence in and around their body, and then it's uncomfortable, and then they have to pretend they're enjoying it, and it's done hopefully for another month or for their next birthday or whatever, like it's but I mean, we're all so different there, and there isn't a normal, and I think there's a societal normal, and that's probably one of the things that good conversations can help overcome.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. Awesome. Great for cuddle, ladies. I love it. So as we age, our body changes, right? We've just spoken about menopause and perimenopause and then postmenopause, but our bones are affected as well. As we age, Tracy, what's the importance of bone health?
Yeah, that's a good question, Nat. Well, we have 30 years to pretty much build the skeleton that lasts us the rest of our lives. And so, you know, with the right amount of mechanical strain, so jumping around, which we'd hope that kids and young adults are doing, and also getting the right nutrition. So getting enough calcium, which we know in New Zealand, most people don't get enough. So the average New Zealander gets around sort of 700 milligrams of calcium, and we need about 1,000. So we're falling short. So we're not doing the right things for the first 30 years. And of course, you know, in that first 30 years, we're getting less mechanical strain through our skeleton because people are choosing to sit on devices. And we know that, you know, quite recently, Sport New Zealand identified the #1 leisure activity in New Zealand as being watching television. That's pretty scary. Yeah. So, yeah, as we go from 30 to 50, we start to lose a little bit of bone mineral out of our skeleton, and our bone mineral density probably describes about half to 70% of the strength of our bone. So basically we're losing about half to 1% of our bone mineral density from 30, where we hit that sort of peak bone mass, to menopause, which is around 51 is the average age in New Zealand. We're losing it at a slow rate, but then when we get to menopause, that sort of 51, we basically drop off a cliff and we start losing that bone mineral at an accelerated rate of around 2%, and we can have lost like 20 to 30% of our entire bone mineral density in the 5 to 6 years around menopause, which is pretty scary. And yeah, although males also lose bone mineral slowly from the age of 30 as well, they don't have that sudden decline that we as women have, that sort of corresponds with that reduction in estrogen, so that hypoestrogenic state, that low estrogen. So, you know, things that we can do from 30 are to be really vigilant with getting the right nutrition. So that's part of it. So getting enough protein, getting enough calcium, and all the other good stuff, but also getting enough physical stimulus to our bones. And that's kind of been the focus of my research, where you know, if you read the textbooks will tell you that once you get to the age of 30, there's no real chance of actually resuming any of that bone mineral density. Like, you can't gain anything once you've reached that peak bone mass. But I was quite curious about that, because I saw a lot of evidence in animal studies and a very few sort of studies that have been done on premenopausal women that maybe there's a chance you can gain a little bit of bone between 30 and 50 if you apply the right mechanical strain. And so I looked at investigating what that might look like, and it's actually not that hard. It's jumping. It's basically just landing on the ground. And one thing we notice when we're over 30 is maybe we stop jumping. You know, we stop actually applying the physical activity to
We
our
have children, Tracy. That's
What's
why
it? Exactly. I hear you, Nat. And some of that jumping is not good for incontinence. Yeah. And I was mindful of that when I was putting together the jump program that I used with my women over the 12 months that I studied these non-athletic women. So we're looking at women that are everyday women. They're not athletes. They're just everyday women. And so the jumping wasn't athletic. It was really just enough to stimulate the bone, which is 3 body weights. And that doesn't look like a big jump. It's basically just a stiff landing, and it's 2 to 3 minutes of that a day. That's all we need, and that's enough to turn bone on. And what I found in the research that I carried out was that during that time where you should be losing half to 1% of your bone mineral density, all of my women were gaining over 3% bone mineral density at their hip and lumbar spine, which are, you know, 2 of the real critical areas. They're the, you know, I suppose the clinical sites that we're most focused on in terms of osteoporosis management. So it's getting a bit of physical activity into your body. It doesn't have to be a lot. The women that were doing the jumping program were doing the jumps while their porridge was cooking in the microwave. You know, it's not a sort of focused exercise session. It's basically just get up from your laptop or from your workstation or from your watching television and the ads or whatever, and just get some jumps, just get a little bit of impact into the body, and that will actually reverse some of the losses that we think are expected to happen. They don't have to happen. It's really it's a green prescription that we are all able to implement into our lifestyles. And if we can do that in combination with making sure we get some calcium, and, you know, a lot of people don't drink milk these days. And so it's like, well, where do we get the calcium from if we don't drink milk? Well, we can drink the milk alternatives, but we have to ensure that they've been fortified with the same amount of calcium that we would get from milk. And so it's checking labels and whether people are actually, you know, confident to be able to determine whether they're getting the right amount of calcium from their soy milk or their oat milk or their rice milk, you know. So we're looking at about, you know, trying to get around 100, 120 milligrams per serving or per 100 mil, should I say. And that's a way that we could actually get the same as we would get from milk. But if we don't actually focus on our bone, then what the stats tell us is that 2 out of 3 women from the age of 60 will sustain an osteoporotic fracture. So that's big stats, you know, that's pretty scary.
What we're saying is that from 0 to 30, we've got optimal time to invest in our bodies and our bone health. But from 30 to 51-ish, we've still got, there's strategies that we can employ to reduce the impact that aging has on our bodies, basically.
And then after 50, we don't have to stop. We just have to keep applying whatever we can. So there's got to be a risk to benefit there. So we don't want people in their 70s jumping if that's going to promote them falling. But we certainly want whatever people can do is going to be better than nothing. So the weight bearing is the important factor. Yeah.
And I think just coming from a slightly different angle as well. So I'm an athlete, have been an athlete my whole life. Got roped into doing a research trial about, I think it was about 4 years ago. And it was mainly because I was actually going through a year of just getting constant injuries, constant strains, constant issues that I just couldn't figure out what the hell was going on. And so I ended up, as part of that trial, had a DEXA scan. And a DEXA scan looks at bone density amongst body composition and other things. And the lady that did my scan and then helped analyze my results, who was of a very different body shape to me, and didn't know anything about me, had not asked anything about my history, my lifestyle, my anything, suggested that I take up jogging outside. And so I'm an ultra runner. I run more often, more days than I don't.
7 days at a time.
7 days more often than too many. I have, however, suffered from RED-S and from all sorts of energy deficiency disorders in the past. And so that gave me a real shock. I was like, how the hell are my bones that like weak? That's ridiculous. Given what I eat, given what I do, that's stupid. And it was through talking with Trace that I realized that my body was so acclimatized to running was no longer a different force. Running was normal. And so actually I needed to be doing something on top of that to actually create the force that my bones needed to increase their density, as well as sorting out a whole lot of stuff and coming off certain contraceptives that weren't helping and all this stuff too. And so through weight training, through actually doing Tracy's jumps as well, I've now got normal bone density, which I'm stoked about. Obviously, had I done that before I hit 30, hopefully I'm still going to be good when I'm 60, but I will keep doing it.
You'll be sweet, amazing.
It's a good point. I was going to say, Hannah, it's a really good point, because people, one of the things that probably frustrates me a lot is that the information that's given to people about improving their bone health is that walking is enough. Well, actually walking is not enough. Okay, and even jogging is not enough. So you really need some targeted landings. You don't need many. You know, 2 to 3 minutes was what it took for my women to do these targeted landings. They weren't hitting the ground more than about 30 or 40 times with nice flat-footed stiff contact. So not the kind of landing you do normally in netball or any other sort of activity, but, you know, really targeting the bone, because normally we attenuate all those forces by, you know, flexing our knees and absorbing the forces in our muscles, which is the right thing to do. But we actually need some targeted landings. And I think if people think that all they need is walking or even jogging, well, actually that's not correct. That's not osteogenic. It doesn't switch on the bone, which is what we're looking to do. Yeah.
Okay, I've got, I really want to talk about stress, but I've just had a quick parto come in. What is the accuracy between a blood test for hormone levels versus saliva tests? And when would you recommend hormone testing? Is this a Tilly question? Yeah.
Could be a Tilly question. It's a huge topic. Ultimately, there's very little reason to test. It mostly is coming from your symptoms, your story, and as I was kind of talking about before, our hormones are really fluctuant. So a test only tells you what's happening at that moment, and you might have a test at that moment that tells you everything's perfect, and you know that your vagina's dry and you can't remember anything, and the last 3 periods have been completely different, and so that test means nothing. As doctors, we're often a disappointment because we don't do a lot of tests in and around hormones. We certainly do some testings in and around other things that may be contributing to potential things we need to rule out, but there's a lot of money being made out of testing. And I think that a lot of those services provide a really great service for women because they often take a really good history and they spend a lot of time talking with women and finding out what's going on. But that kind of cherry on the cake of the saliva test at the end is unfortunately not so relevant. Like that's not what's going to guide a better outcome. Better outcome comes from education, understanding, empowerment, and then potentially some interventions which are holistic through multiple different means. So short, long answer for a very massive topic.
So big. You're right. I have had a few people ask about the hormone testing. We are running out of time, but I really, because stress is such a massive topic, and man, we could just have one whole kōrero on stress. But before we go, let's just have a quick kōrero about stress. Hannah, do you want to just open up with how do you think stress impacts us as wahine?
In every way possible. Is kind of the short answer to that. And I guess the first thing though is when we talk about stress isn't just one thing. Stress is a mental stress. Stress is a physical thing. Stress can be caused by emotion. Stress can be caused by exercise, can be caused by diet, can be caused by our environment. It's the way that we respond, and it's the way that our body physiologically responds to a situation. And unfortunately, stress, when it is a negative stress, so whether that's a negative emotion, whether it's a negative strain or something that's going on with the body at a certain point in time, puts us into this fight or flight response. And a fight or flight response is essentially our body preparing to literally fight or fly away from something. And so from a physiological point of view, everything that is going on internally is focused on that response. And so, for example, like blood flow to our gut reduces and increases to our muscles. Blood flow our brains become and our eyes, vision, everything becomes very focused on this very small thing. Our hearts are working harder, blood pressure goes up, heart rate goes up. Our immune system, don't need that. Our ability to reproduce, you don't need to do that when you're stressed. So there's massive amounts of changes, and it's dependent on whether that stress is there short term or if it's actually been there long term. The repercussions of that can be so much greater on your body. Stress literally affects, like those estrogen receptors, it literally affects every single aspect of you, every part of you. It can literally shrink your brain size. It can literally change everything to do with you, the way that your gut works, the way that you perceive situations, can give you a lot of heart issues, can do all sorts of stuff. So I could talk about it for days. Stress affects everything. And when it comes to hormones, I mean, your stress is, exactly, it results in kaboom. And so stress is kind of the underlying thing. If we can first address the way that your body responds to stress, and that might be purely just working on your breathing, working on your sleep, allowing you to have better recovery strategies, better coping strategies during the day, you can have a direct effect on what your hormones are doing, what your stress hormones are doing, and the way that your body's going to respond to different situations, including perimenopause, menopause, so on and so forth.
Amazing. Does anybody else have a quick kōrero about that? And then we're gonna ask our last pātai of the night.
I think you've got that chicken egg thing with the stress and what we've been saying all along for especially this perimenopause that's come up a lot tonight, and that lack of familiarity and the changes. And so how do you tell a woman to manage her stress who's got an elderly parent and an absconding teenager and a gushing period and they haven't slept for a week, you know? So but if she understands that her estrogen's high and the progesterone's fluctuating and it's okay, and there's potentially things that can be done about all of that, and it's a wave to be ridden, and it's not something that she's doing wrong or that she's failing or she has to fight, then that can really help lower the stress response to what's going on around and internally. And so then you can have more kind of inner peace and understanding. So I just think like my main message is like understanding education and like acknowledging what the body's kind of trying to tell you, because yeah, I think stress is the biggest killer.
That is a beautiful segue into, if there was one piece of advice, whānau, that you would impart for our people, for our whānau watching at home, what would that be? Tilly, did you just want to say exactly what you've just said?
Yeah.
Tracy, have you got something that you would like to say as a takeaway for our whānau watching at home?
Sure. Yeah, I think just tagging on to what Tilly just said, I think that management of stress through things that we can control, like what we eat and what we do, and it doesn't have to be planned. We don't have to go to the gym or go for a run. It's just some form of physical activity. We know that creates amazing hormones that can balance the stress hormones. So, you know, it may not feel like what you need to do, but nobody ever feels bad after going for a walk or on the beach with the dog or whatever, some kind of physical activity. And then the other thing is nutrition. Food's the most powerful drug we put into our bodies. And so, you know, just acknowledging that, and even though life is crazy busy and convenience food is calling, you know, at every second, if we can actually eat some fruit and vegetables, you know, eat something real and whole, we don't have to get caught up on the macronutrients, just eating real food and getting some kind of physical activity. I think that's got to be the answer to aging well and dealing with menopause.
Yes, love it, Trace.
Yeah, cool.
Cherie?
I think for me, it's listen, and listen with all of yourself. Listen to your body, listen to your friends, your colleagues, your family. Just listen. Sometimes it's not always about offering advice, but it's just part of that kōrero where you're sharing a problem to have it. And just being as open as you feel comfortable to be without too many graphics. Especially over dinner, it's just inappropriate. But yeah, just listen, learn, and share your experiences, because we're also individual. That, you know, if we can crack up at someone else's story, go, oh, same, like there's something where you're not isolated anymore and you're not alone, and that's the longest road, is when you feel like you're the only one in the world experiencing this.
Love it, Cherie. Ness, what's your final whakaaro?
Yeah, I think it's just don't underestimate like the impact that life, you know, everyday life can actually have on your overall health and well-being, and just take that time to look after yourself, because you are important. You know, yeah, so I think that's my key thing. Just look after yourself, and don't underestimate the impact that stress and everyone taking stuff from you can have on you and your overall health and well-being.
Nice. Hannah?
Yeah, Tilly stole mine. But I think part of it is recognizing that every female, every woman in the world is going to go through certain stages. There's familiarity amongst womanhood with every stage in life. Not everyone's going to go through them the same. Not everyone's journey is going to be the same, but the more open we can be in these conversations, the more knowledge, the more information, the better we understand our own bodies, what we can do to manage things, seeking professional help when needed, but then equally talking with friends and actually feeling comfortable to be open. I mean, they say your friends are your cheapest therapists, and they really are, because you can laugh and you can feel good and you can share stories, exactly as Cherie's been saying. And so I think the more open we can be with these conversations, the more questions we can ask, and also trusting the sources of information is also really important. So seeking out advice from those that we do trust, and then allowing, I think that's just kind of the key. We're all in it together. Nothing should be hidden, nothing should be kept secret. The more we talk about it, the more normal and natural it's going to feel for our younger generations as well, and they don't need to feel that shame. So
And I think be kind, as my life coach keeps telling me, be kind to yourself, Natalie. You've got loads going on. Why can you say lots of nice stuff to everyone else, but not to yourself? So I'm still learning, Everyone watching at home, thank you so much for logging in, for all of your whakaaro, your comments and your pātai. I would just like to acknowledge my amazing panel. Thank you so much, all of you, for your whakaaro and your aroha and your pearls of wisdom. So thank you so much for coming on tonight. Whānau at home, we'll see you next month, where I think we're talking about cancer. So log in and have what we have to say next month, hear what we have to say next month. It's been a long day. Ka kite everyone, po mai pere.